The Cold War was behind them, but America's dominance was not guaranteed. Without a world competitor to challenge it, the US was in a situation it had never been in before, free to remake the world in its image. The battle for hegemony, however, did not end in conquest. It simply changed form. The new weaponry was not missiles or soldiers, it was money. As the 1990s passed, economic superiority became the engine of American power. Globalization spread US businesses and culture worldwide. Wall Street imposed a capital movement, and a wave of technological revolution transformed industries. Silicon Valley became the new center of power, giving birth to technology giants that would transform how people communicate, finance, and even politics. But with this new dominance came uncertainty. Could economic dominance substitute for military dominance? Was the US creating a system of long-term stability, or was it setting the stage for a catastrophic failure? As we move into the 21st century, these questions will be answered in ways no one can imagine. With military power taking a back seat, America found a new frontier to conquer: technology. The 1990s saw a revolution go digital, and Silicon Valley emerged as the new center of American power. Unlike the wars of the past in which tanks and missiles were employed, this war was waged with microchips, software, and networks that connected the world. The rise of the tech giants would transform business and redefine politics, war, and everyday life. The dot-com bubble of the late 1990s marked the turning point. With the proliferation of the internet, companies were racing to claim their spots in the online future. Startups overnight popped up, touting to revolutionize how individuals communicate, conduct business, and entertain. Billions were pumped into internet-related projects as speculators, a mania on the stock exchange. Amazon, Yahoo, and eBay became familiar terms, showing everyone that the web was no brief phenomenon, but an indicator of tomorrow. Yet the growth was boom and bust. The bubble burst in 2000 with the collapse of the dot-coms, destroying trillions in market capital and wiping out millions of startups. But this destruction spawned a new era of tech dominance. As one business failed, another thrived. Microsoft, Apple, and Google became the cornerstones of the digital revolution. With Bill Gates, Microsoft made personal computers mainstream for families and companies. With Steve Jobs, Apple innovated consumer electronics with sleek looks and groundbreaking design. Google, founded in 1998, transformed information using its dominant search engine, providing the foundation for an entire digital economy. These tech titans not only changed business, they changed the nature of world power. The invention of social networking sites and search engines gave corporations unprecedented control over information, affecting political discourse and even deciding elections. Meanwhile, advances in cyber technology introduced a new kind of war. Cyber spying and hacking became imperative tools in the battle for power. The internet era had achieved something remarkable. It had stripped the government of its power and bestowed it on business. But with this new mastery came an uncomfortable question. Had America's economic empire been built on a footing that would last for centuries, or was yet another collapse just around the corner? As one industry after another was revolutionized by technology, America's influence extended far beyond the nation's shores. In the post-Cold War period, the US was not just a military superpower, it was the heart that circulated life into the world economy. American firms turned into multinational giants, expanding into markets across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. From burgers to high-tech conglomerates, the US was not just selling goods, it was selling a lifestyle. And it wasn't by chance. Globalization was a strategy. In the 1990s, America was moving into an increasingly globalized world where American business would thrive. Free trade agreements were the new instruments of economic control. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, was passed in 1994, which united the US, Mexico, and Canada into a gigantic network of commerce. At night, firms were able to outsource their manufacturing base to where labor was cheaper. US factories shut down, but profits reached new levels. The World Trade Organization, WTO, came into being in 1995, breaking down trade barriers further. American corporations had access to world markets as never before. and they set about exploiting it in a big way. Retail giants like McDonald's, Walmart, and Coca-Cola became symbols of American capitalism, spreading their reach to the farthest corners of the world. But globalization was a two-edged sword. While it made U.S. companies stronger, it brought onto the stage a powerful new competitor, China. In 2001, China entered the WTO, merging itself into the international economy. U.S. firms scrambled to access China's vast labor pool and cheap production. Manufacturing went abroad, making China the world's workshop. Walmart, Apple, and Nike, all American household names, used Chinese workers to save money. At first, this relationship seemed to work. The U.S. got inexpensive goods, and China got employment and economic growth. But then, a chilling question came. Was China emerging as America's greatest economic competitor? By the mid-2000s, China wasn't just producing American-made goods. It was developing its technology industry, global brands, and vision for economic dominance. The U.S. had built an empire by way of globalization, but was it now building the foundations for its demise? With China's rise and the fragility of free trade policies, America's economic machine's weaknesses were beginning to show, and soon enough, those weaknesses would turn into a full-blown crisis. For years, America's economy was unstoppable. The rise of Silicon Valley, the dominance of multinational corporations, and globalization ushered in an era of unprecedented prosperity. But in the background, a financial time bomb was ticking. Wall Street, powered by deregulation and greed, had created a system that was bound to collapse. And in 2008, it did. It started with the housing bubble of the early 2000s. Banks greedy for more money began to extend subprime mortgages, risky loans to buyers who could not afford them. The rationale was simple. House prices would never go down, so even if the borrowers defaulted, banks could still resell the houses at a profit. Wall Street saw a chance and sold these dodgy loans bundled into investment products that were called mortgage-backed securities. Investment banks sold them to the world and guaranteed that they were safe. Behind the scenes, the entire system was based on bad debt. By 2007, the housing bubble had begun to deflate. Home values no longer increased, borrowers began defaulting on their loans, and banks found themselves with billions of worthless assets. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers, a giant U.S. investment bank, failed, sparking a financial panic. Markets collapsed globally. The stock market crashed, businesses went out of business, and millions lost their jobs and homes. The American economy, which had been the engine of world growth, now threatened to drag the world into a deep recession. The government quickly moved to cut back on the damage. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, amounting to a whopping $700 billion, was planned to save giant banks and companies. Interest rates were cut, and money was infused by the Federal Reserve. However, for everyday Americans, a comeback was overdue. The crisis in 2008 uncovered America's vulnerability as an economic power. The time of unregulated Wall Street supremacy had come and gone, and the world wondered, was America still the financial power that it once was? Or had it constructed a system that would merely crash again? The 2008 financial crisis rattled the foundations of global capitalism, but it did not signal the end of American economic supremacy. Rather, it exposed a new power dynamic, one in which multinational corporations, rather than governments, emerged as the true designers of global influence. After the crisis, as governments faced debt and political insecurity, corporations proved stronger than ever. Internet giants such as Google, Apple, and Amazon spread beyond borders, defining economies and even dictating politics. These corporations were not confined by boundaries. They operated across many countries, with revenues that surpassed the GDP of most nations. Silicon Valley, which was once the center of innovation, became the hub of contemporary economic influence. The information revolution enabled these companies to gather information, manage communication networks, and influence consumer behavior globally. Governments, even the mighty United States, were reduced to negotiating with CEOs instead of diplomats. Earlier, America imposed its will through military intervention, but during the 21st century, economic instruments substituted weapons. America employed sanctions, trade embargoes, and financial systems such as SWIFT to dominate global markets. Nations that were against American policies were economically isolated, demonstrating that market power could be as strong as military might. China, being aware of this change, challenged the supremacy of the US by building its corporate empire, which resulted in the current economic rivalry between the two powers. Tech wars, trade wars, and sanctions were the new fronts. As we continue, there is still one question. Are countries still in charge, or are corporations the true masters of the contemporary world? The seeds of the contemporary struggle for power were sown in the debris of 2008, and their implications are yet to be revealed. America did not only govern with guns, it governed with dollars. But does economic dominance last forever? The 2008 financial crisis served as a wake-up call, revealing the weakness of a seemingly unstoppable system. But while Wall Street rebounded and tech giants expanded into worldwide empires, threats started surfacing from unfamiliar quarters. As America remade the world through corporate hegemony and digital revolution, a new challenger emerged. China, once an economic upstart, became a colossus, challenging US dominance in ways the Cold War never attempted. The battleground was no longer military or economic only. It spilled into cyberspace, artificial intelligence, and advanced technology. In this high-stakes power game, the rules are shifting faster than ever. Can America catch up, or are we seeing the start of its decline?